My mission, should I choose to accept it, and I most definitely did, was to weaponize sound. "A 30-foot gong?" he repeated. "For your backyard?" "That's right," I said, trying to sound as serious and confident as possible. "Solid bronze, the best you've got. And I need it to be resonant, very resonant." "Resonant, huh?" he said, stroking his chin. "You want to, wake up the neighbors?" "Something like that," I replied with a grin. My back porch was my sanctuary, a place of quiet contemplation and gentle breezes. And the soundtrack to that sanctuary was provided by a simple set of bamboo wind chimes, a gift from my sister after a trip to Bali. They hung from the eaves, swaying gently in the wind, producing a soft, melodic clinking that I found incredibly soothing. It wasn't much, just a set of bamboo wind chimes hanging from the porch. The sound they made was gentle, soothing, a subtle melody that blended with the bird song and the rustling leaves. It was peaceful. Apparently, in Sunridge Estates, peaceful was a code violation, I thought, as I sat on the porch swing, sipping my morning coffee and listening to the chimes. They were a subtle counterpoint to the sterile silence that seemed to be the preferred soundtrack of my HOA-controlled neighborhood. The gentle tinkling was barely audible beyond my own yard, a whisper of sound that added a touch of whimsy to my otherwise ordinary suburban existence. Of course, I should have known that any deviation from the HOA-approved silence would attract the attention of the neighborhood's resident noise Nazi. I just didn't expect it to happen so quickly. The knock on the door was sharp, insistent, and utterly devoid of any hint of neighborly warmth. It was the knock of someone on a mission, someone with a complaint, someone who probably enjoyed enforcing rules more than breathing. Karen McDougal. Picture a woman whose idea of a good time was alphabetizing her spice rack and reporting illegally parked cars, whose spirit animal was a shushing librarian, and whose favorite sound was the deafening silence of a perfectly compliant neighborhood. She was the self-appointed sheriff of Sunridge Estates, the queen of quiet, and, unfortunately for me, my next-door neighbor. She stood on my porch, ramrod straight, her arms crossed, her lips pursed in a disapproving frown. Her floral print dress, ironically, clashed violently with her severe expression. "Mr. Henderson," she began, her voice as sharp and brittle as dry leaves, "I'm afraid I must address a matter of grave concern." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. "Your wind chimes." "My wind chimes?" I replied, feigning innocence. "What about them?" "They're disruptive," she declared, her eyes narrowing. "They create a constant, irritating clatter. They're a distraction. They disrupt the neighborhood ambience." She said neighborhood ambience, as if it were some kind of sacred, fragile ecosystem that could be shattered by the slightest tinkling of bamboo. "They are making it impossible for me to hear myself think." Karen, true to form, didn't just complain to me directly. She weaponized the HOA, unleashing the full force of its bureaucratic might upon my unsuspecting wind chimes. Within days, I received a formal notice, printed on crisp, official-looking HOA stationery, informing me that my exterior noise-generating device was in violation of the community's Quiet Enjoyment Guidelines, a document I hadn't even known existed. The letter cited obscure bylaws, vaguely worded regulations, and a whole lot of subjective interpretations of acceptable noise levels. It demanded the immediate removal of all unapproved noise-generating yard decorations, threatening escalating fines and potential legal action if I failed to comply. It was signed, in a meticulously neat cursive script, by Karen McDougal, chairperson, Noise Abatement Committee, a committee I was pretty sure she'd invented just for this occasion. My internal reaction was a mixture of annoyance, frustration, and a growing sense of disbelief. Were these people serious? Was the gentle tinkling of bamboo wind chimes really such a threat to the peace and quiet of Sunridge Estates? I thought. It was absurd. It was petty. It was peak HOA. I tried to reason with Karen. I invited her over to my porch, offered her a cup of tea, and pointed out that the chimes were barely audible from her property. I explained that they were a source of relaxation for me, that they added a touch of beauty to my backyard, that they were, in fact, quieter than the leaf blowers that roared through the neighborhood every morning. But my arguments fell on deaf ears. Karen McDougal was not interested in reason, in logic, or in the concept of peaceful coexistence. She was interested in rules, in regulations, and in enforcing her narrow definition of acceptable noise levels upon everyone within her reach. The wind chimes, in her mind, were a symbol of defiance, a challenge to her authority, and they had to be silenced. I stood on my porch, the HOA's threatening letter clutched in my hand, staring at my, now officially unapproved, wind chimes. They swayed gently in the breeze, their soft melodic clinking a defiant whisper against the silence Karen demanded. I could comply, of course. I could take down the chimes, surrender to Karen's demands, and return my backyard to the HOA-approved state of quiet conformity. But the thought filled me with a deep, simmering resentment. This wasn't just about wind chimes. It was about principle. It was about the right to enjoy my own property, to express my own individuality without being harassed by a power-hungry, noise-obsessed busybody. And then it hit me. A spark of an idea. Audacious, unconventional, and wonderfully subversive. If Karen wanted silence, I'd give her silence. But before that, I'd give her a sound she'd never forget. I'd turn my backyard into a sonic battlefield, a testament to the power of noise, a giant middle finger to the HOA's obsession with quiet. If Karen wanted silence, I'd give her silence. But before that, I'd give her a sound she'd never forget. I'd turn my backyard into a sonic battlefield, a testament to the power of noise, a giant middle finger to the HOA's obsession with quiet, I thought. A slow, mischievous grin spreading across my face. A giant gong. It was the perfect solution. It was decorative, technically. It was a percussion instrument, not a noise-generating yard decoration. And it was, without a doubt, the most gloriously inappropriate response to Karen's demand for silence that I could possibly imagine. Karen McDougal, you want a war on wind chimes? You've got one. Prepare to be gonged into submission, I declared internally, already picturing the look on Karen's face when she saw, and heard, my new addition to the backyard. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to unleash the full force of my sonic rebellion. My mission, should I choose to accept it, and I most definitely did, was to weaponize sound. But before I could unleash my sonic fury upon Karen McDougal and the HOA, I needed to do my homework. I needed to ensure that my giant gong, however outrageous, was also perfectly legal. I delved back into the dreaded HOA bylaws, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. I scanned through sections on noise restrictions, exterior decorations, and yard maintenance, searching for any clause, any phrase, any vaguely worded regulation that might prohibit my plan. I also researched local noise ordinances, state laws regarding nuisance sounds, and even, just for good measure, federal regulations on the use of large percussion instruments. My browser history went from bamboo wind chime reviews to giant gong suppliers and decibel levels of various percussion instruments in record time. I chuckled as I navigated the surprisingly complex world of noise regulations. To my delight, and Karen's future dismay, I found nothing. There were rules about excessive noise during certain hours, of course, but there were no specific rules against outdoor percussion instruments. There were regulations about the size and placement of yard decorations, but nothing that would prohibit a large, albeit unusual, piece of art. The HOA, in their obsession with controlling every blade of grass and every paint color, had overlooked the possibility of a sonic rebellion. They'd left a loophole, a glorious gong-shaped loophole, and I was about to exploit it to its fullest potential. Finding a supplier for a 30-foot gong was, unsurprisingly, not as easy as ordering a new set of wind chimes. This required some serious searching. I eventually found a company, Gongs Unlimited, yes, that was their real name, that specialized in crafting custom-made gongs for orchestras, meditation centers, and apparently eccentric suburban homeowners with a vendetta against their HOA. The owner, a man named Bob, another Bob, was initially bewildered by my request. "A 30-foot gong?" he repeated, his voice a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "For your backyard?" "That's right," I said, trying to sound as serious and confident as possible. "Solid bronze, the best you've got, and I need it to be resonant, very resonant." "Resonant, huh?" he said, stroking his chin. "You want to, wake up the neighbors?" "Something like that," I replied with a grin. Bob, it turned out, was a man who appreciated a good challenge. He explained the process, the materials, the craftsmanship that would go into creating such a massive instrument. He talked about the different types of bronze, the importance of proper hammering, and the secrets of achieving a deep, sustained tone. He also, with a twinkle in his eye, warned me about the potential for structural damage if the gong was struck with too much force. The price was astronomical, of course. This was not a cheap undertaking, but I considered it an investment in my peace of mind, in my freedom, and in the glorious, satisfying sound of Karen McDougal's impending meltdown. I placed the order, and the countdown began. The arrival of the gong and the accompanying construction crew was an event that would forever be etched in the memories of the residents of Sunridge Estates. It was like watching a scene from a disaster movie, only instead of a giant asteroid or a rampaging monster, it was a 30-foot bronze gong. First came the steel framing, a massive, towering structure designed to support the immense weight of the gong. It rose from my backyard like a skeletal skyscraper, dwarfing the surrounding houses and casting a long, ominous shadow over Karen McDougal's perfectly manicured lawn. Then came the gong itself, delivered on a flatbed truck, wrapped in protective layers of padding and looking like some kind of ancient mythical artifact. It took a crane, a team of workers, and a whole lot of careful maneuvering to hoist it into place, securing it to the steel frame with heavy-duty chains. The neighbors, as always, were watching. They gathered on their lawns, their expressions a mixture of awe, amusement, and a growing sense of, what on earth is going on over there? Children pointed and gasped, dogs barked, and even the teenagers, normally glued to their phones, seemed impressed. Karen McDougal, of course, was not amused. She stood on her porch, her arms crossed, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. She'd make frantic phone calls, presumably to the HOA, to the city, to anyone who might be able to stop the madness unfolding in my backyard. I, meanwhile, maintained my usual facade of innocent unconcern. I'd wave cheerfully to the neighbors, offer them refreshments, and explain that I was simply installing a piece of yard art, a cultural installation designed to enhance the neighborhood's aesthetic. I'd even, on one occasion, offered Karen earplugs, suggesting that she might find them helpful in dealing with the ambient sounds of the neighborhood. She did not appreciate the gesture. The construction crew did. With the gong fully installed, the steel frame secured, and the giant wooden mallet, custom-made, of course, in hand, it was time for the inaugural strike. I'd chosen the moment carefully. Sunset, on a Friday evening. Just as Karen McDougal was likely settling down for a quiet evening of beige-themed relaxation, I stood before the Gong, feeling a mixture of excitement, anticipation, and a touch of nervousness. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, research, and construction. The moment of truth. I took a deep breath, raised the mallet, and with all my might, struck the gong. The sound was extraordinary. It was a deep, resonant, earth-shaking boom that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet. It was a sound that could wake the dead, a sonic boom that echoed through the quiet suburban streets of Sunridge Estates. The neighbors, who'd been warned, mostly, about the impending noise, reacted with a mixture of awe and amusement. Some cheered, some clapped, some simply stared in open-mouthed wonder. Birds took flight from the trees, startled by the sudden, overwhelming sound. Dogs barked, car alarms blared in the distance, and, as I'd hoped, Karen McDougal's windows rattled. I could see her silhouette in her living room window, her hands clapped over her ears, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. It was magnificent. It was ridiculous. It was glorious. And Karen's windows rattled. Mission accomplished, I thought, lowering the mallet, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. The sound waves continued to ripple outwards, carrying with it the sound of an era. The era of silence in Sunridge was over. The aftermath of the inaugural Gong strike was, to put it mildly, dramatic. While the rest of the neighborhood reacted with a mixture of amusement, awe, and a healthy dose of, "What the heck was that?" Karen McDougal reacted with the predictable fury of 1,000 suns. She stormed over to my property, her face a mask of apoplectic rage, her floral print dress billowing around her like a sail in a hurricane. She was practically vibrating with indignation, her voice reaching a pitch that I'm pretty sure only dogs could hear. This is unacceptable, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the massive bronze disc hanging in my backyard. You've turned your backyard into a Buddhist temple. She seemed particularly offended by the Buddhist temple aspect, as if I'd erected a shrine to some foreign deity in the heart of her meticulously beige-toned community. I emerged from behind the Gong, a picture of calm, unruffled composure. "Good evening, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I see you've noticed my new addition. What do you think? I call it the Titan Gong." "It's a gong," she roared, her voice cracking with outrage. "A giant, earth-shaking, window-rattling gong. It's noise pollution. It's disruptive." "It's a cultural art installation, Karen," I corrected her gently. "A celebration of sound and vibration. A testament to the power of human creativity. And, as I'm sure you're aware, decorative outdoor percussion is perfectly permissible under the HOA guidelines." I paused for effect. "I only strike it twice a day, sunrise and sunset. Think of it as a neighborhood wake-up and wind-down call." You're insane," she sputtered, her face now a shade of purple that I'd previously only seen on overripe plums. "I'll have it removed. I'll call the police. "Feel free," I said with a shrug. "I've already checked with the city. It's all perfectly legal." Watching Karen's face contort with rage and disbelief was more satisfying than any gentle chime could ever be, I thought, struggling to suppress a laugh. She was a cartoon villain, a caricature of outrage, a walking, talking embodiment of HOA tyranny, and she was completely, utterly powerless against my giant, bronze, legally sound gong. Karen, true to form, immediately called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding the immediate removal of the Titan Gong and a complete overhaul of the neighborhood's noise pollution regulations. She envisioned a swift condemnation of my monstrosity, a unanimous vote to silence the gong forever, a restoration of order and quiet to Sunridge Estates. She was, as usual, in for a rude awakening. The meeting, held in the same beige-walled community center room, was a scene of utter chaos. Karen, looking increasingly frantic and disheveled, presented a PowerPoint presentation titled, "The Gong Crisis, a Threat to Our Community." The presentation was filled with blurry photos of the gong, exaggerated claims about its destructive power, and a series of increasingly desperate bullet points. Excessive noise pollution. Disruption of neighborhood peace. Attracts undesirables, with a picture of the Zen meditation group. Violation of aesthetic harmony, with a picture of my gong next to a picture of a beige wall. Her arguments were met with a mixture of skepticism, amusement, and outright hostility. Some members, secretly delighted by Karen's torment, asked pointed questions about the HOA's authority to regulate artistic expression. Others, genuinely intrigued by the gong, suggested that maybe it wasn't so bad after all. "It's kind of calming, actually," Mrs. Gable said tentatively. "My grandkids love it," Mr. Henderson added. "They call it the Big Boom Boom." Karen's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. The HOA, once her loyal army of beige-clad enforcers, was now a divided, unruly mob. And the gong, her nemesis, was gaining support. Just as Karen was about to launch into another tirade about the dangers of large percussion instruments, I decided to play my trump card. "Actually, Karen," I said, interrupting her mid-sentence, "I'd like to introduce a few guests." I gestured towards the entrance of the room, and in walked a group of serenely smiling individuals, dressed in flowing robes and carrying meditation cushions. It was the local Zen meditation group, the Silent Lotus Society, who'd contacted me earlier in the week, expressing their interest in using my backyard for their practice. Their leader, a calm, soft-spoken woman named Anya, addressed the assembled HOA members. "We've been using Mr. Henderson's gong for our morning and evening meditation sessions," she explained. "And we've found it to be incredibly beneficial. The deep, resonant sound helps us to focus our minds, to connect with our inner selves, and to achieve a state of profound tranquility." She went on to describe the healing vibrations of the gong, its ancient spiritual significance, and its positive impact on the community's overall well-being. She even offered to lead a brief demonstration, inviting the HOA members to experience the calming power of the gong for themselves. The effect was immediate. The HOA members, initially hostile and suspicious, were now intrigued, even relaxed. The Zen practitioners, with their serene smiles and their talk of inner peace, had completely disarmed them. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she was about to explode. She'd been outmaneuvered, out-Zened, and utterly defeated by a group of people who found inner peace in the sound of a giant, booming gong. And then, of course, it went viral. Someone, presumably one of the Zen practitioners, posted a video of our morning meditation session, with the gong's deep, resonant sound providing the backdrop. The video spread across social media like wildfire, attracting attention from all corners of the internet. People were fascinated by the story, by the sheer audacity of building a 30-foot gong to annoy an HOA president. They were captivated by the sound, by the image of the serene meditators, and by the ongoing saga of Karen McDougal's increasingly desperate attempts to silence the monstrosity. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the Great Gong War of Sunridge Estates, and interviewing delighted neighbors and a very, very unhappy Karen McDougal. National news outlets followed, then international. The online comments were a mixture of amusement, admiration, and a healthy dose of schadenfreude. "This is the most epic HOA revenge story I've ever heard," one user wrote. "Give this man a medal," declared another. "I want a giant gong in my backyard," a third commented. I started receiving requests from all sorts of people. Musicians wanted to record with the gong. Yoga instructors wanted to hold classes in my backyard. A local art gallery even contacted me, proposing an exhibition featuring the Titan Gong as its centerpiece. My backyard, once a source of neighborhood controversy, was now a viral sensation, a symbol of rebellion, a testament to the power of sound, and a surprisingly popular destination for those seeking inner peace, or just a really good Instagram photo. Karen, in a last-ditch effort to silence the gong, reported me to the city. She claimed it was a public nuisance, a noise violation, and a threat to the structural integrity of neighboring homes. Apparently, she believed the gong's vibrations could cause earthquakes. The city, obligated to investigate, sent an inspector to my house. He was a young, surprisingly cheerful guy named Kevin. Not the same Kevin from the billboard incident, thankfully. He arrived with a clipboard, a decibel meter, and a slightly bewildered expression. "So," he said, after I'd led him to the backyard and shown him the Titan Gong, "you're telling me this gong is causing problems?" "Only for one person," I replied with a grin. Kevin proceeded to conduct his inspection. He measured the gong's dimensions, he checked the structural integrity of the steel frame, and he took several decibel readings, both during a strike and during periods of silence. His conclusion? The gong was perfectly legal. It met all applicable noise ordinances. I'd been careful to only strike it during permitted hours. It was structurally sound, and it posed no threat to public safety. He even, to my amusement, complimented me on the unique artistic design and the surprisingly calming sound. Karen, who'd been watching the entire inspection from her window, looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. The city inspector's verdict was the final nail in the coffin for Karen's anti-gong campaign. The HOA, already divided and demoralized by the viral fame of the Titan Gong and the growing support from the neighborhood, completely fractured. Some members, secretly delighted by Karen's torment, openly sided with me, praising the gong as a unique cultural asset and a symbol of community spirit. Others, still clinging to the remnants of Karen's authority, tried to argue for some form of compromise, perhaps limiting the gong strikes to special occasions or designated hours. But it was no use. The tide had turned. The neighborhood had spoken, and they had spoken in favor of the gong. The HOA meetings, once dominated by Karen's shrill complaints and petty grievances, became battlegrounds of conflicting opinions, with Karen's voice increasingly isolated and ignored. The end, when it came, was swift and decisive. Karen McDougal, the once feared Queen of Quiet, the self-appointed sheriff of Sunridge Estates, sold her house and moved away. She didn't announce her departure, didn't say goodbye to anyone, just packed her belongings into a moving truck and vanished, presumably to inflict her noise-averse tyranny on some other unsuspecting community. Her reign of terror was over, her legacy a cautionary tale whispered among the residents of Sunridge Estates. The silence she'd so desperately craved had finally been achieved, but not in the way she'd intended. The Titan Gong, once a source of controversy, became a beloved neighborhood tradition. I continued to strike it twice a day, at sunrise and sunset, its deep, resonant sound a reminder of the day we defeated the HOA and embraced the power of noise. The local Zen meditation group continued to hold their sessions in my backyard, their chants blending with the gong's vibrations, creating a surprisingly harmonious and slightly surreal atmosphere. The neighborhood children, inspired by the gong's imposing presence, started calling my house the Gong Temple and inventing elaborate stories about its mythical origins. Even the HOA, under new, more enlightened leadership, embraced the gong. They included it in the neighborhood's promotional materials, describing it as a unique cultural landmark and a testament to the community's artistic spirit. The irony, of course, was delicious. And so I remained the unlikely guardian of the Titan Gong, the accidental hero of Sunridge Estates. My backyard, once a battleground in the war against wind chimes, was now a sanctuary, a place of peace, beauty, and the occasional earth-shaking boom. It was sunset. I stood before the gong, mallet in hand, ready for the evening strike. The sky was ablaze with color, the air was still, and the neighborhood was hushed, anticipating the sound. A new neighbor, a young couple who'd just moved in down the street, walked by. "Excuse me," the woman said. "We're new to the neighborhood. We were just wondering, what's the deal with the giant gong?" I smiled. "It's a long story," I said, "but the short version is, we had a bit of a disagreement with the previous HOA president about wind chimes." They laughed. "Well," the man said, "we love it. It's unique." "It is," I agreed. "It is." I raised the mallet, took a deep breath, and struck the gong. The sound washed over us, a deep, resonant wave of vibration that seemed to shake the very ground beneath our feet. Who knew that a set of wind chimes and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just got to install a 30-foot gong to find your peace, I thought, as the sound slowly faded away. I lowered the mallet, a feeling of quiet satisfaction washing over me. "To the Titan Gong," I whispered, raising an imaginary glass. "May its sound waves forever ripple through the suburbs, a warning to all future HOA tyrants."